Merry Meet. I'm Aislin, and this is a special episode of Ask Aislin where I am here answering all of your top questions about witchcraft today. So if you're here with me live, you can drop your questions and comments in the chat, and I will answer those as well. But I actually have a good number of questions that people gave to me beforehand. So I'm going to dive right in. There's a lot of good stuff we're going to talk about tonight. So our first question comes from Dawn, and she asks a really good question that a lot of people wonder about. She says, why is there so much fear and hate when people use witchcraft in different ways every day? So I want to share some of my thoughts on this. People are have this terrible need to be involved in other people's business and to judge other people's actions and thoughts. And there's also a great amount of fear and hate just in our world in general. And unfortunately, as witches, we do experience some of this, a good portion of it actually at times. There's a lot of people who are very close-minded about witchcraft. This has to do with the collective. Has been a systematic oppression of women, and I consider men in this category, all genders in this category, but especially of women across history. And much of this has to do with the Abrahamic religions, which we have to remember are religions of control. So in these religions, they exalt heaven over the earth, which is where a lot of us as witches are practicing our magic. The goal in these religions is to escape this plane in order to get out of this, like almost like we're in bondage here, right? This is the place that's ruled by the devil, and to get out of here would bring us towards God. So we have to remember that whenever we are thinking about the hate and that fear and that judgment that we're getting from other people. And unfortunately, it does have consequences for us and how we practice. But in an effort to spread their religion far and wide, they came into places and they taught people, they demonized the practices that earth-based religions and spiritualities had practiced for years. And these were usually nature-based religions, and they were usually religions that exalted or at least put the divine feminine on an even playing field to the divine masculine. So there's so many layers that we could get into this, but I mean, what this ends up being as a result for us is a world that's very much afraid of witchcraft, very much afraid of the unknown, very much afraid of the subconscious, the unconscious, what lies there, afraid of magic. So as witches, I do think that we are here in larger numbers now to reclaim some of this, to reclaim the divine feminine in order to find a healthier version of the divine masculine. So that masculine archetype right now is running wild, right? Waging wars, taking control, subjugating groups of people. So finding that healthier version of the divine masculine, taking back the word witch as well. So I even work with someone who will refer to anyone she doesn't like as a witch. And that is derogatory towards us, right? So reclaiming that word and taking away that negative connotation that the collective has placed on it in order to subjugate the divine feminine and to subjugate those natural and nature-based religions. Educating people about our own practices can be important too for some of us, and normalizing witchcraft so that we're not all freaky people doing crazy evil things, and we're just normal people who happen to have a different spirituality, or if we consider a religion, a different religion than the mass population. But I do want to say that it's also okay to avoid people and situations where the judgment is especially high. And that includes family members. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that a little bit later, because someone else brought up a similar question, and hers was more about her family. But just know that while as a collective of witches, we are working to fight this negative connotation of that word and this demonization of ourselves and our practices, it's also okay individually for us to just avoid those people and those situations that make us feel judged or, are the ones who are dispersing all that hate and all of that fear. Hello, Tanessa and Misty are here. Nice to see everybody. Um, so I do want to add, before I go to the next question, that I do think that there is this increased popularity in witchcraft right now, and I think it's a very positive thing. I think the divine feminine is, making a comeback and is ready to reemerge. She has already reemerged in many places. She's been here the whole time. She's never not been here. But that collective has shrouded us from being able to see her, and now more and more she's being revealed. So I hope what this means for us is that in the future generations, we will be able to see there's less of this fear and this hate, but it's hard to say. Until then, though, there are things we can do if we feel called to kind of normalize witchcraft and really take back that word. So I'm moving on to Tanessa's question, and she's here live. So Tanessa asked a great question that I've heard others ask this before. She says, how important is it to know your family's history or origins in order to know what to practice? So my answer to you is actually, I'm going to answer this back with a question. And my first response is, how important is it to you? So it's not really terribly important to the grand scheme of things. It's mostly what's important to you. So now if you were someone who was born a hereditary witch, was born into practices, then it might be more important. You have things that are being handed down from grandmothers or mothers or perhaps fathers or grandfathers. And these practices and these stories of the culture and of the deities and the myths, these are going to be highly important to hereditary witches. The hereditary witches probably make up a smaller fraction of witches in our population, so most people are going to fall into the second category, which is how important is it to you? So if you find that you're particularly drawn to your family's history, then that is your unconscious's way of saying there's something important here that maybe you should explore. Now, what I do want to add, though, is to never feel that you have to or to feel forced to. So I want to give you just a little bit of my own experience so you can kind of see. So my heredity is Irish and English mostly. My dad has done a bunch of our family tree. He's really explored it greatly. And so I know there's a little bit more in there I should look at, but most of what was coming up was coming from Cornwall, coming from Ireland. But the thing is interesting is that when I was called to witchcraft in my late teens, early 20s, I actually chose Venus and Aphrodite as my patron at that time. Now, that had a lot to do with what I was focused on at that time. I was really focused on love magic and really drawing in partners that would resonate with me. But Venus and Aphrodite are not from my lineage at all, from my culture, at least in this one lifetime. I also think that many of us get drawn to myths and to those deities of the Greek and Roman pantheons because in school, those were a lot of the myths that we were taught. So later, I found a deity, Epona. She is an Irish deity, a Celtic deity, who also had ties to Rome. Her name was whispered in my ear during a meditation, and she is more aligned to my culture, at least in this lifetime right now. Now, I'm also drawn to Lakshmi, who is a Hindu deity. I found her years later after that. She's actually the deity I probably work with most right now, including Ganesha, who is my patron. So what I do want to say is that some of us are drawn to practices and deities from our lives that were past lives. So from the cultures of our past lives. I recently had I did a reading with a channeler, and she said something that I expected to hear, that I had lived in many different cultures. So it's not shocking that we're then drawn to some of those practices from those other cultures. Ultimately, what you want to do is you really just want to follow where you're being drawn to right now, and where that is right now may be different in 5 years or 10 years or even in next month. It may be different. So just be open to that, and just know you don't have to feel forced to study your family's lineage and their history and their practices unless called to. Okay. And we see some more people are joining. It's so nice to see everybody here. So again, if you're here live, you can feel free to put comments and questions in the chat. I'm going through the questions that were sent to me earlier, but I will get to everything anybody has to ask in the chat as well. Okay, so I'm moving on to the next question. This one was given to me by Irene. She says that she is a little bit calmer now about the craft, but when she first started, she was and is still afraid of casting a circle. So this is not uncommon to hear. There is this element when we're first starting out, we want to do everything right. And there's actually someone who asked a very similar question later. I'm going to go into, how to know we're doing something right. But to address Irene's question about the casting of the circle, I have a lot of thoughts on this. So first of all, there are many ways to cast a circle, and I want to really help you feel like you can just explore the ways that you feel drawn to. So just don't worry right now about making a mistake. I promise you, when you're casting a circle, what you're doing essentially is you're setting off this space as sacred, and there's really no wrong way to do that, okay? So just kind of try to put that out of your mind. Now, that being said, I'm going to give you a couple of options that I think the most important thing to do is to find the one that resonates with you, which may not be the way that resonates with you the next time. You can cast a circle a different way each time. So of course you can cast your circle with an athame or with a sword or with a wand or even with your finger. Your finger is your built-in wand. And you can find an incantation for casting a circle in a book. You can find one online. You could write one yourself. Don't feel so pressured into writing one right now. If you don't feel like doing that, you can always use someone else's. Now, you can decide which way to cast it. If you're going to cast it clockwise, Diasil, or counterclockwise, Widdershins. I personally do Diasil most of the time, but when we're doing dark moon rituals in our membership, sometimes I do it Widdershins to just set this up as a different type of ritual. We're going to be experiencing a different kind of energy. Now, another thing you can do is the simplest form of casting a circle is just imagine white light surrounding you. So just being able to, sit there, close your eyes, and just imagine that light surrounding you. Now, sometimes people like to imagine it sort of in this 2D dimension kind of coming around us, but you can also think of the circle as like an egg that is above you and then slightly below you as well. So you can imagine all of that light kind of surrounding you as you cast the circle in your mind. Sometimes people think that we have to have this big production in witchcraft, and we just simply don't. All the magic can be done in your mind. Like literally an entire ritual can be done in your mind. You don't need anything at all. But sometimes we like to have those props. We like to have the athame or the wand or the sword or something just to get us into the groove of the energies that are around us. And it also helps very much to change our state of consciousness. So while we don't need the props, I'm always a big supporter of using them. I use them too, because honestly, I really do think it helps shift your consciousness. Now, another thing you can do is if you are someone who you're leading groups for other or leading rituals for other people, you can honestly cast the circle in your mind. You can talk people through it. Just have them close their eyes and then just imagine that circle of white light being cast around them. I also like a technique called the rainbow ribbons, where this works for a group of people, and have them close their eyes and tell them to imagine rainbow colored ribbons coming out of their heart or whatever part of their body they consider to be their center, perhaps their solar plexus. And then just imagining all those ribbons intertwining together in that etheric space to create the circle. That can be a really nice way to cast a circle. And then a really easy way is just hand to hand. So just have people grab onto the hand of the next person, grab onto the hand of the next person. That works really well for casting a circle with a group of people. Now, you mentioned that you were feeling calmer now, that you've been doing some more of the practice, but you've been in it. I don't know how long, you didn't really say, but I think that's a great thing. As we do practice more, we get more confident, we let go of our fears. And like I said in the beginning, there really isn't a wrong way to cast a circle. So just let go of that and just just see what happens. Just see if you could just do what you're drawn to, and I promise you it's going to be okay. Okay, next up, I'm going to move on to, and then Risa's here with us, and she said, thanks for the confirmation of the white light. That's the way she's done it. Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to cast a circle. You don't need a big production. Okay, next up, I'm going to answer a question by Jamie, and Jamie's been practicing for a while. So she said she's been practicing for 23 years, and she's been practicing, but deity work has never really been her thing. She said, how does one communicate and work with a deity? So before I get into my thoughts, I will tell you that I have plans to do a whole episode just on working with deities. And at the end, I'm also going to tell you about a full course that I have coming out in June that includes all of the topics together. So some of you may find that interesting, and deity work is at least 2 different modules within that course. But let's talk about how do we get connected to deity? How do we work with deity? So I get asked this question a lot. There are some people who don't work with deity. That's totally fine. So if you're one of those people, don't feel that you need to work with deity. But if you feel called to, here are some ideas for you. So my first suggestion would be to study myth. So I guess this is assuming that a person doesn't really have a patron, hasn't really been called by a patron. So if you're looking for a patron, you're looking for a deity to work with, I suggest studying myths. Now, I think this book is really great. This is Parallel Myths. The author is J.F. Bierlein. Bierlein. It's a really great book. I read this like 20 years ago in one of our book circles back in Boston. This book goes through tons of different myths, and you can read through them, and some of these will start to inspire you, kind of like I would read those Venus and Aphrodite myths in that beginning when I was first starting out. I was very drawn to those stories in a lot of ways. Another set of books that I think are really great for trying to learn about the gods and the goddesses, it's a set of 2 books. So this is The Witch's Goddess by Jane and Stuart Farrar. Let's see, the camera, there we go. It found it. Okay, so there is a version for the goddess, and then there is a version for the god. So same authors, Farrar. It's spelled Farrar. So these are very good books. They go through many myths about different deities, how to connect to them. And what I like about this idea is that you will be able to read a bunch of different stories, and you'll feel drawn perhaps to one of them. Now, if you feel drawn to one, then begin to research that deity a little bit more. Now, I'm going to talk about another way to actually discover deities, and then I'm going to talk about once you've discovered one, what would you do next? So a second way is to study deity archetypes. So sometimes people aren't drawn to like a specific deity, but they're drawn to a specific deity archetype. So what this means is, let's suppose you have an intention in your life. So like me, go back all the way to that beginning time when I was first coming to the craft. I had this intention of finding love. And so it's very natural. It makes a lot of sense that I picked the goddess Venus and then, her Greek version Aphrodite. So I would ask myself, do you have an intention in your life right now? Do you have a theme in your life right now? If so, explore deities connected to that intention or that theme. So for example, let's say you want to work with Mother Earth energy. Either you are a mother, perhaps you're trying to become a mother, perhaps you're trying to resolve issues with your mother, or you just want to connect. You just feel drawn to the earth mother, right? You want that connection to the divine feminine. So you might work with the divine mother earth archetype. So for example, Isis or Gaia, Freya, Tiamat. You might work with one of them. Let's suppose that you have a lot of conflict in your life right now and that you need to rouse and bolster some energy in you for like a fighting spirit, right? You got to get in there. You're going to have to do some kind of fighting. Then you can work with the war goddess archetype. So here you might work with Athena, Macha, Kali, or perhaps even the Morrigan. So these lists are not exhaustive either. I'm just giving a few suggestions. And that goddess is tied to the crone aspect of the goddess as opposed to that earth mother goddess tied to that mother aspect. And then suppose you're doing some shadow work, or let's suppose you're dealing with a loved one who crossed over, right? Or you're really exploring kind of your own feelings about death. So maybe you want to work with an underworld goddess. You might explore the underworld archetype. And this could be Persephone or Hel. Ereshkigal is really good for shadow work. Caradwyn. Again, the list not exhaustive, just giving some ideas. But this would be a way to sort of explore it a little differently than just like, let's go look at myths and find one that we're drawn to. In this version, let's go look at what's going on in our lives. Let's explore that deity archetype. And then from there, maybe pick one or more of those deities to work with. And I will tell you that you sometimes might work with multiple ones. So have shared this before, so I'll share it here. That I'm trying to get pregnant. I've been trying to for a while. And so I've worked with a lot of fertility deities. So I've worked with Yemaya. I work with Lakshmi currently. Epona is a mother goddess or a fertility goddess. Ostara. So I worked with multiple of these deities because that energy is a theme in my life right now. That will be a theme that won't be there in some time, right? So that's one way that we can connect to deities. Okay, now once you have chosen a deity or an archetype, I would suggest setting up a small altar. It can just be a super simple little table, like these little tables back here. That is like a $5 lac table from like IKEA. Put an altar cloth over it. Research what the gods or the goddesses that you picked like. Leave a little offering there. So, for example, I know that Lakshmi likes red flowers. So does Kali. So put some flowers on the altar if I discovered that, right? Tell the deity that you've chosen your intention that you'd like to work with them, and then be open to what comes up. Look for signs out in nature. And that is another thing that I want to mention, is that sometimes you might see signs in nature that guide you towards a deity. So for example, I see a lot of crows, and when I do, I really do think that's Odin speaking to me, but other people might connect the crow to a different deity. Seeing hares could be Ostara talking to you. If you see a frequent animal a lot, maybe research what god or goddess is that animal tied to, because the gods and goddesses don't really speak to us all the time in English or whatever our chosen language is. And sometimes it comes through symbolically. So just really being open to what's coming through to you in nature, signs and things that are coming through there. Um, and then once you put your intention out into the universe, then just try to, observe what's going on around you. How is that deity trying to talk to you? So like I mentioned, I will be doing a full episode on connecting to deity. That'll be coming up in, I don't know, maybe next month. But for now, I hope that helps. All right, I am going to move on to the next question. This one's by Carla, and she's with us live here, I think. So it says, how does one practice without being judged? She said, I have been afraid for many years to start, and now I know she has started. And so she says, now as my eyes are opened, I'm more comfortable, but still a piece of me is worried about being judged. Well, you're not alone. So in the beginning, I already talked about all the fear that people have about witchcraft. So I guess my first question to you is, who's judging you? And is it possible in any way to avoid these people at this time? Or at least not be open with them to what you're doing. Because you are newer to the practice, I would suggest trying to eliminate anything that is going to be mildly disruptive to you, and judgmental people probably will. So if you can avoid them, or at least avoid talking about it, that might help you out right now. And it would take some, it'll probably take a little of that pressure off as you try to get more comfortable in the craft. Now, what that means is, you can practice in private if you want to be private about it. And there are also various ways that you can stay in the broom closet or stay partially in the broom closet. So, for me, with my family, some of them are fundamentalist Christians. It's very difficult. We do not resonate on this at all. And so I've had to stay partially in the closet with some of them, despite obviously, as you know, I am a high priestess. I've been one for many years. I've practiced for a very long time. I run a business that is witchcraft based, but still, I choose to be in the closet, in the broom closet with some people because of this. I just don't want the unnecessary disruption to my own work and my energy. But what we should remember is that ultimately those who judge us do so through their own small-mindedness and their own, it is really their problem and not ours. So at some point we may need to release the fear of being judged. That is something that I had to release in order to bring my business out to more people, is I did have to let go of the idea of maybe being found out by my family. So if they find out, they find out. I had to let that go eventually. So sometimes we do have to do that. And what we should remember, though, is that someone's opinion of us really isn't our business. It's not really about us. It's about them. So if you're able to kind of free yourself of that, caring about it, it can help. Ultimately, it is up to you how you let it affect you. So I know that for each of us, this is going to be personal. We're each going to approach this in a different way. Some of us are fully out and don't care, and some of us do choose to stay closeted completely or partially, and just know that everybody is doing what's going to be best for them. But just see if you can let go of a little of it. But for the meantime, practice in private if you need to. Keep what you need to secret, or at least quieter from those people. And over time, you may feel more open to bring more of it out into the open. All right, I hope that helps. And then, yeah, she said it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, just try that. You try that for a while and see how that goes. Okay, so next up, I have, you know what? I have a question from Nancy who's along the same line. So I thought I'm going to combine hers in here too. So Nancy says, hers is actually more specific to her family though. So she says, if you and your little sister are the first to admit it, and I assume she means being witches, in the family, but the family thinks you're foolish, is it okay to disown them mentally if you can't do it physically? And I say yes, absolutely. I don't usually, I don't use the word disown for myself personally. I would say like disengage. But just like I was mentioning previously, it's okay to disengage, to disown mentally, energetically those people. So for me, it's just not going to be something that I'm ever going to talk to my brother or my sister-in-law about. It's never going to be a useful conversation. So it's totally okay to kind of cut that part off energetically. It doesn't mean that you totally won't have any connections to your family at all, but just I made a decision that religion, spirituality, and politics, because we do not see eye to eye, my family and I, with politics. I just decided those are just things that we don't need to talk about, and we'll make our lives here together in this plane while we have this time together. We're going to make that better if we just don't talk about those things. But yes, just energetically or emotionally, mentally, you could just cut that part off and still be connected to them physically. Okay, so then I'm going to get back to Valerie had a great question, and hers is also kind of connected. There's sort of a theme in some of these questions tonight. She said that despite I think she means witchcraft, being in a way free for all, I'm always wondering if the things you do is the correct way. She said, I'm always fearing I will upset someone or something. So the thing about fear is that it will keep us very much crippled, and it will keep us from reaching our highest potential in almost every case. So the more that we can break through our fears, whatever lies at the root of those, the better. If you can let go of some of that fear, maybe even ask yourself, can I let go of a little of that fear right now just to test it out, see how it feels? So some people may not disagree, I should say some people may disagree with me here, but in my experience, rarely do I think that you're ever going to upset someone. By someone, I think you probably mean like a spirit or a deity or something. Rarely do I think you're going to ever upset anything or anyone in your practices. If you can enter with a sense of humility and grace and really just be open to receiving you will be received well because of that, okay? So I did notice that like there you had a little thread going on, and then you were talking back and forth to someone. You said, I sit there and I hope that I'm doing good. And I kind of honed in on those words. So I just want to say something about that. So there is that residual fear in the collective that I talked about all the way at the beginning, that subjugation of the divine feminine and everything that has to do with the earth and witchcraft. And unfortunately, the Abrahamic gods are terribly fearful. If you read the Old Testament of the Bible, it's extremely fearful, right? And there's a reason for that, because remember, some of that, is coming down. So some of these words are being translated down for these messengers, or who are the people who are receiving, the channels who are receiving this information from spirit. But those people also exist within a frame in history. So at the time when some of these teachings were coming down, while there's truth, there's very much truth in some of the Christian practices, absolutely. Look at much of what Jesus said, beautiful ways to live. But it gets so convoluted and colored by the people historically who are writing this. And so if we remember that the means to control people was one very large reason for the religion, we understand that why those gods were so fearful, because one way to control people is to instill great, great fear in them. I mean, look at the book 1984, right? So, in my experience, though, the divine is not like that at all. That's why I broke away from the Christian church in the first place. I was like, this strange God who's so like demanding and so mean in the Old Testament, this is not my God. This is not my experience of deity. So my experience is that the divine is much more compassionate, sometimes indifferent. Some of the gods and goddesses, when you work with them, they're actually kind of indifferent. They don't really care, but it's not that they don't like us or that they're mad at us or anything. It's just that some of them just are a little aloof and don't really seem to care that much. And then some are very compassionate. So, but rarely have I ever seen them be vengeful like that Old Testament God. So, if you could just let go a little of that, because I think that that fear of like wanting to be good, that comes from those Abrahamic religions, that whether or not we're even raised in them, we're raised within this collective, which means that we're tapped into that collective mind, that collective fear. So some of that fear, I think, is that's where it comes from. So if you could just let go of a little of that, don't worry, you're not going to upset anybody. Just let go and let your intuition guide you. Okay. All right. Kristen says she's got a good question here. I got a couple more, and then we'll see if there's anybody else in the comments that have some. So Kristen said that she is having a difficult time trying to figure out what to do on the significant day. So for example, Imbolc, full moon, equinox, etc. She said, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I want to start small and work my way up, but I can't seem to even do that. I get nervous and worried that I'm doing the wrong thing. See, this question's good right after Valerie's. And I definitely lack confidence. So I have obviously listening back to what I said to Valerie will probably be valuable to you as well. You'll probably resonate with some of it. But as far as what to do, let me give you some ideas that I think will take some of the pressure off. You did mention that you wanted to start small. And so here's some small ways that honestly, though, are really big ways, because they're big ways because of the huge impact that they're going to have on your connection to the cycles here. But they're going to seem very small. These are very small things to do. So the first thing I would do is try to get in the flow of the cycles as much as possible. So we sometimes think that witchcraft is about spells and rituals and all these things. And while, yes, we can do those things as witches, really at the core of all this is living within the cycles of the seasons. There's two different cycles, right? We have the seasonal cycle, the wheel of the year, and then we have these little tiny cycles going on inside, which are all the lunar cycles. So keeping a moon journal can be highly effective. So for this, you will just simply get a journal that you'll devote to it. Write down the phase of the moon. You can go online. You can look that up every day. What phase is the moon? And then write a few words about how you're feeling energetically and how you're feeling emotionally. And over a couple of months, you'll be able to start to see patterns that I feel this way on the full moon, and I feel this way on the third quarter. And you will really just start to pick up on your own way that you resonate with the cycles. Another thing you can do that is a practice that I have done now for quite some time. It's so simple, but it is such a great way to just bring lunar energy in and just being aware of how that energy is waning and waxing. Is on the new moon, I get two candles. So you can actually see back on the altar. Those are sometimes they're called prayer candles. So the big long ones, you'll sometimes see them at church. So I get two of those, but you can get any kind of candle. And I start those on the new moon. And then every night I burn them down a little bit. And so the very, very last day, the dark moon, which is the day right before the next new moon, that's the last day I let them burn all the way out. And then I start a new set on the next new moon. And I just do this over and over. And all they do is they sit on my altar, but they're a constant reminder, because right now if we're a few days past full moon, so we're into that waning gibbous. And so I look over there and I can see where those candles are, and it's just a reminder of me that that energy is, waning now. So I like to do that. It's just a very simple way to get in the cycle of the lunar cycle, the flow of the lunar cycles. Now you can also just do a simple ritual on the new moon or the full moon or the dark moon. You don't have to do all of them. You could just pick one to start, and that ritual can be as simple as just lighting a candle and meditating for a few moments, or not moments, but like minutes. That could be that simple, or it could be more elaborate. Perhaps you'll try out a spell on the full moon. One thing you can do is on the dark moon, you can write down all your fears on a piece of paper and rip it up or burn it. That can be a simple ritual to do every dark moon. Or on the full moon, you can charge your moon crystals or make moon water by putting out water in a bowl underneath the full moon, maybe even put some crystals in that, and then bottle that up and use it for spells later. So just little tiny simple things, but I recommend picking something small like that and repeating it cycle after cycle after cycle, because it's the repetition that instills it all inside. And then I think you'll start to feel like a little more in the flow and not so hesitant about what to do. Now, as far as the solar cycles, what I would recommend is trying to sync with the solar year. This is going to sound maybe strange to say, but just eating seasonally. Go get the produce that's on sale. And when we eat seasonally and we don't just rely on food that's being shipped hundreds and thousands of miles to us, we start to resonate with the solar energy. Read about the upcoming Sabbath. Just like I showed the books earlier for gods and goddesses, there is a great book. This one's by Dane McCoy. And this is Sabbats. It's got every one of the 8 Sabbats, a chapter on each one. It's got correspondences at the end. This is a great book. When I was first starting out, right before the next Sabbath, I would read about it, and then I would pick something from here to do, a craft or something like that. If you really want to get into it, Llewellyn, who also makes that Sabbats book, has a whole series of books for each of the Sabbats. So this is the Imbolc one. They called this particular author, who is Amber and Azrael Aaron. They called this one Candlemas. That's another word for Imbolc. So we're in Imbolc season right now. Get this book and read about it, because Imbolc isn't just one day. It's a season that lasts until we're ready to transition into Ostara energy. And then you can read about the Ostara. Get this book and read about this one. This is how I learned all about the Sabbats. I would just read these books over and over until eventually all of that was instilled in me, and I would practice different practices and just really get resonant with that solar energy. And you could decorate your altar with seasonal items. Books like that will tell you. If you don't want to get the books, just Google ideas for Ostara altar, right? When it comes time to get into Ostara. And then put some seasonal items on your altar. Maybe honor a deity that's associated with that specific Sabbat, like Breed for Imbolc season, Ostara or Oestre for Ostara season. And you can research offerings to leave for them and just put them on your altar. And then the other thing I would say is you could also attend other people's rituals, see what they're doing either online or in person. That will give you some ideas. Just know you don't have to lead rituals yourself. Honestly, you don't have to do rituals. You could go to other people's also. That's another way to celebrate. And above all, just relax. Try not to worry. Just do simple things, fall into the cycle of the seasons, and just enjoy the ride. Okay? All right, so next up, I have Patrick. This is a good question. This is a really good question, and I will be doing a whole episode on this eventually. I have a lot to say about this, so I'm going to keep it short here. So he said, why does magic or spells work in certain situations but not in others? Well, great question. It is one that a lot of people ask. So let's talk about when spells work and when they don't. So sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And sometimes they did work and you didn't realize that they did. So sometimes there are some spells that are better than others. A lot of it has to do with how aligned your will is to your true will. So your true will is connected to your higher self. And your higher self is overseeing everything that's going on. It knows why you're here. It knows about your soul contract, and if we can align that will here physically in the physical body up into that higher self and that true will, we're going to have much more success with our spells. Now, shadow work helps a lot. Patrick is in the membership, so I know he's already doing shadow work. Shadow work is a way that you will really very much align your will to your true will. So doing a lot of shadow work, you will often see that your spells become more successful afterwards. Also working with the solar plexus, because that is tied to the will, that can help connect the will to the true will or the higher self. Now, things when spells really do work, what I found is their intention was very, very clear. It stated very clearly. It was very simple. And most of the spells that are timed well tend to have greater success. I know that people will disagree with me. I've heard people say you do spells at any time, and you absolutely can. But if you want the extra energy, this isn't like all made up. So the seasons, they are not made up. The moon cycles are not made up. So timing them to that proper timing of the can add that extra oomph of energy to the spell. Now, don't miss me though, because I'm not saying people can't do spells whenever they want, because they can. Now, I think this is more interesting to talk about is when do spells not work? So here is some things that you should look at. So if you have a spell that didn't work, here's a little checklist I'd go down and ask yourself some of these questions or consider some of these things. So sometimes they don't work because they weren't meant to. So what I mean by this is simply they just were simply not aligned. They're not in alignment with what is meant for you in this life. So there is a contract you made before you came into this incarnation. There's a set of things that you are here to work on. This does not mean that everything is fated and you're some slave to the divine or something. You made choices. You just made them outside of here. And part of this incarnating into this world is forgetting what some of that is. Now, we can learn a lot through studying our soul contracts, through working with our given archetypes in this world and this incarnation. We can start to learn more about what our true path is. That starts to help us understand why sometimes our spells don't work. They just simply were not aligned with why we're here. It's like the divine mind kind of says, okay, I hear you, but I'm going to overrule it this time. Now, sometimes there are unexpected results from spells. They did work, they just didn't work in the way you were expecting. That can be a possibility as well. So if you have a spell that didn't work, I would kind of look at what's going on around you and just say, is there any way that it did work, I'm just not seeing it? Okay, that would be something I would think about. Now, here's some other things to consider. So duration can be one. It could be that your spell is working, it's just not manifested yet. Sometimes spells take a while. They can actually take 6 months to a year, because remember, there's this whole like solar cycle going on, and there's also a second like kind of half cycle in the middle, which is connecting a full moon of one sign to the new moon of that same sign, which takes place 6 months later in the year. So, for example, we just came through the Leo full moon. The Leo new moon is going to take place in July. So any spells that are started right now, people might look for results in July. So somewhere like in that time before July or at July. So that's something to think about. So it may just be that you haven't given enough time. Another thing is mistakes in spells. This is usually about intention. This isn't really about bungling up ingredients. Sometimes people are really afraid of ingredients and things. Really, when we make mistakes in spells, it's usually about the intention. It just wasn't clear enough. Maybe didn't specify what you wanted. So, for example, let's say somebody does a spell for a new relationship, but they don't specify that it's a romantic relationship, and then they end up with a new best platonic friend or a cat or something like that. I've heard people say that I did a spell for a relationship and I got a bunch of cats. So the universe sometimes has a sense of humor, and it does not respond to words the way that we do. So you just want to make sure your intention is as clear as you can make it. Sometimes the spell is poorly timed, like I mentioned before. Using that universal energy can be helpful if you feel like you've done a spell and it didn't work, and you know that you did it in a time that wasn't really opportune. Try it in a better time. Sometimes, like I said, the spell is not for you. It's just not within the divine plan that was set out for you before your incarnation. And also to consider is like if you had gotten that thing, perhaps it would have interfered with your own divine plan and your own path. So I know we feel disappointed when the spells don't work, but sometimes they're actually for our better good. And then sometimes we're just simply not in alignment. If you do a spell when you're sick, when you're angry, you're distracted, you're nervous, I would reconsider if that spell didn't work. First of all, I would consider about like doing spells when you're quite sick. I don't typically recommend it. If you can wait until you're feeling a little bit better, do it. Sometimes you have to do it when you're sick, and that's okay. But but if a spell didn't work while you were feeling kind of under the weather, think about maybe doing it later again when you're a better mindset. And then sometimes there's just no release. Like we do the spell and then we dwell on it so much. And basically, what we're doing when we're thinking about, did it work? Is it going to work? It's drawing some of that energy back into us. We need that energy to go out and expand into the universe for the manifestation. So try not to dwell on it. Just kind of let it go. And sometimes there's just simply no real world backup. So we do a spell for a job and we don't actually put a resume out there. Well, how are we going to find a job, right? Or we don't look for one. So we do need to do some real world backup. The divine actually responds to when we are doing things in the mundane world as well. And then sometimes it's just too much scattered energy. So at some of our covens rituals, we've had people kind of lead spells for themselves, but then they invited others to do the same intention, but like for themselves too. And so what has typically happened is the original person who had the intention, who needed that intention. See, everybody else, they didn't necessarily need the intention. They're just being invited to come along, and kind of tweak it for themselves. That person who had the original intention finds that her spell falls flat because there was too much going on, too much scattered energy. Instead, what really should happen is there's a group working towards like one person's like very specific goal. Should all lend energy to that one person, send that out into the universe, and then if somebody else has a need, do theirs at a different time. So that can make a difference. And then sometimes the intention is just so big that it needs repetition. That is okay. This is especially true if you're trying to change biology. So if you're trying to heal yourself of a terrible illness or something, if you're trying to like my own fertility spells, things like that, sometimes those need a repetition. So they need to be done cycle after cycle after cycle, because sometimes it's your own self-belief that's getting in your way. And honestly, this is strange to say, but sometimes what the spell is it's just trying to give you the confidence into believing that it's possible for you to manifest this thing. So if you do that cycle after cycle for a couple of cycles, it helps to build your own self-belief. Okay, and then finally, I've got one more question, and then I'm going to look at the chat, see if anybody else wants to talk about anything. This is for two people. Both Branda and Wilma had a very similar question. They said, what she says, I think this was Branda's question first. I don't know who was who. Oh, hold on, I got him right here. Okay, so Branda said, how do I start? And she also mentioned that she was drawn to the divine. And then Wilma said, how do I find my path? I'm so new to magic. I've always felt I had something, but for the last few months, I've really wanted to find out. So here's a couple of ideas. I would just say, I always say this to anybody coming to the path when they say, what do I do? How do I begin? I say, why are you here? Why did you come to the path in the first place? Are you here because you want to explore divination? Are you here because you want to explore healing? Are you here because you want to create a relationship with a deity or the divine? Are you here because you want to work with energy? So find out what drew you here in the first place and begin to explore that, because that may open up a path. There's a lot of information out there, and you can get very overwhelmed when you're new. There's so much of it. So if you really can't figure out what exactly it is that kind of drew you here, one thing to do is just to start with a good 101 book. So I really love Christopher Penczak. If you ever have a chance to hear him speak in person, he's amazing. He wrote this book, The Outer Temple of Witchcraft. It's part of a series, but this is kind of his beginning 101. It goes through so much, including everything you'd want to know if you were kind of starting out. I can vouch for this book. It's fantastic. So great 101 book here. If you are exploring Wicca, and not just witchcraft, then this was actually one of my first books that I ever read. It taught me so much. And honestly, even though it's called Wiccan teachings, there's a lot in here for just a regular witch too. So this is a great book as well. And also Scott Cunningham has a great set of kind of 101 books. He would be a great author to check out. You can also consider finding a good mentor if you're not sure what to do, or a group to study with. But you can also learn so much on your own in the beginning. Before joining a group, I recommend that people take some time. I guess I should say, before joining a coven that they're going to practice with, take some time and really explore, why are you on the path in the first place. A lot of covens will not even accept you until you've had 6 months to at least a year of self-study anyway. So getting out there and kind of learning on your own before seeking out these groups might be good. But then there's also study groups, which aren't covens per se. Those are just people who have come together to kind of learn together or learn a certain topic. So you can seek those out. They're either in person or virtual. In any city too, if you go to meetup.com, you'll find that there are often some kind of witchy circles that you can go and hang out with people and just see what other people are doing. So I hope that helps. But that would be what I would recommend to someone beginning. Okay, so let me see if I've got any questions here. We kind of know we're going long. I had so many questions people had sent me. I wanted to go through everything that I could. Carla said the broom closet. She loves that. Yeah. Yep. Some of us are partially or all the way in the broom closet. Open more now. Yeah, okay. Tanessa said that she thinks that more people are more open-minded now. I agree. I think that they are. I also think that in some areas they're still not. I don't know if anybody saw the outrage over Sam Smith's performance at the Grammys, and the Christian right is scared that this is the devil that's come into the mainstream. But I think there's still a lot of fear. But I agree with you, as there is more and more different people are coming out, it's makes it easier for others to be more open-minded. How to thicken your own bubble. Valerie asked about how to thicken your own bubble. I think she means her own energy around her. So you can do that to thicken your bubble. It's really quite about intention. It's just kind of imagine that expanding out and strengthening and protecting you on either side. I will say something very interesting is that my friends and I went to the Psychic Healing Arts Fair last weekend or the weekend before that, and we had aura photography done. And a couple of us had our auras were kind of pinched in at the sides. There's black around them, and they were sort of pinched in. And the woman said that you're pulling your energy in to protect yourself. And she said instead, imagine making your aura bigger, pushing it out. So you're basically keeping, rather than pulling in, contracting your energy in to protect yourself, push it out so that you have more around you, more space. And I haven't tried it as much, but one of my friends did it, and she said it like was pretty eye opening to her when she did it. It made a big difference. Okay. Still be, oh goodness. Okay. I'm answering people's questions, so I'll stay on here and answer as many of these as people need. It just jumps on, unfortunately, the feed will jump on me sometimes, so I lose track. Okay, Misty was asking about, see, I keep losing it. If I don't get to if I lose someone's question, I will come back into the feed later and I'll answer stuff. She said, can you still be Wiccan or pagan if you do not celebrate the Sabbats because of where you live? Yes, you don't have to do anything to be any of these things. Do you mean celebrating the Sabbats because like you can't celebrate them where you are? I'm not sure what you mean by that, but yes, you can be Wiccan, you can be pagan, you can be a witch, and not do spells or not celebrate Sabbats or not have deities. It's you are making your own practice. And then Tanessa said her deity is Isis. Okay. And she said many people have said not brown or white, and I say you don't know what color was the Egyptian area 5,000 years ago. Been there. You said you're very at home with Isis. Yeah. So anybody who's feeling very called to a deity, that is the one. Definitely explore her. Oh, I see what you're saying. They said you're not brown, you're white. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So like I said earlier, we it's very, very probable that if we believe in reincarnation, it's very probable that many of us have lived in multiple different cultures. There's a very good chance, it doesn't matter if you're white here, there's a very good chance that you lived across the world in a different incarnation, and perhaps you worshipped Isis at that time, and maybe that's why you are so drawn to her. I say just, always have humility and grace when you are doing any practices that are not your culture of this life that you're in right now, this incarnation you're in right now. But there is nothing wrong. So many people worship Isis. I mean, she's the queen of heaven. I mean, they say Mary is so connected to her. Freya is so connected to her. Lakshmi. There's so many goddesses who are so connected to that beautiful, beautiful deity. So there's nothing wrong with it. Okay. Okay, Carla says, can we find out what your soul contract is? I think I always wanted to know why I was here. What is my purpose on earth? Feel like I would have a better feeling of purpose. So I do, in my membership, we are going to be exploring soul contracts in a couple months. So that is a way to look into it. But you can also Google it, just Google like, how do I figure out what my soul contract is? A lot of times too, you can sort of meditate as you connect more to your higher self. Then you will start to understand more what you're here for, what your path is, what is that contract you made before you incarnated. And Mary was talking about layering your bubble. Yeah, you can put other layers around it too to protect yourself. And then, oh, okay. All right. So Misty, talking about Misty's question earlier, she said, I feel weird doing the rituals in front of her Christian husband, even though he supports me. All right. Can you do the rituals it depends on your space, but is there any way to kind of get into a space where he's not there, not watching or something, or do them outside? That's another option. But if you feel like you want to do the practices, you want to do the Sabbats, I try to find a way to do it, even if it's going out in the yard or something and doing it there. If you feel like, but you're lucky because even though he's Christian, you said he supports you. So try to find something that works for the two of you, but maybe for the time being, try to do your practices where somewhere where he's not, even if that's going out in the yard or something. Let's ask the main person. I just want to say follow. Yeah, Valerie says, follow what your heart says. I absolutely agree. Yeah, just follow what your heart says in all things, right? So whatever people are called to, follow whatever you're called to is going to be the right path for you. And then Carla says, what is merry meet and blessed be? I want to know what I'm saying. Okay, so merry meet is often just a way of saying hello. So it does come from a little poem that it's more substantial, but at the end it says merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. And so we often say that at the end of a circle. And it's just a way to say, like, we're happy to be together, and when we leave in good terms. Merry meet, merry part, we leave in good terms. And merry meet again is that we expect to be together once more. So it's just like in the pagan community, it's just a way of saying hello. And then blessed be is sort of like amen in Christianity. It's just like a way to just say, I don't know, it's just, in some ways, it's just a response to anything you agree with that's kind of witchy or spiritual or something like that, or in this vein. But, and it's oftentimes just kind of repeated, sort of like amen. It's like if you were in church and the preacher was talking and everyone says amen when they agree with it, it's sort of like that. So like if like you agree with something that someone says, blessed be, like I agree. Okay, so I think that is, so Misty says that she doesn't have a lot of space. I see. Yeah, I know that can be hard. You can also do just kind of meditative rituals too for for any of the Sabbats, but it doesn't have to be some big production and some outward thing. Okay, so I think that I got to everyone's questions, and so since it's already gone an hour, I'm going to stop here, but I will go back through all of this, and if I've missed anything, I will answer people's questions there, okay? And then next week, I'm going to be doing an episode on shadow work tips, I'm going to be sharing more shadow work tips, because we're moving into further into that waning part of the cycle where shadow work is very well aligned. And then I do want to mention is that in March, my membership Shadow Seekers is going to be opening its doors up for another round of members. And we expect it to fill up, all of our spots to fill up. So if you're interested in joining us, we do shadow work together, we do energy work together, we do rituals together. So if you're interested in joining us, get on the wait list. If you're not on it, let me know. I'll put you on the wait list. And those are the people I'm going to offer spots to first and give them all the information so they can decide if it's for them. And we'll be open for about a week in March, and then we're going to close the doors again and then work with that. All of our members. I devote all my time to the members. So this is why I don't keep it open all the time, is I want to devote time to the people who are in there, and then we open it every once in a while to bring more people in. And then for those of you who are newer to the craft and really want a basic understanding of all the aspects of it, I do have a course called Demystifying and Deepening Witchcraft that I am going to be unveiling in June in kind of an interesting way. I'm looking for at least 10 people to take it, and it's going to be super cheap compared to super reasonable compared to what it will cost later. It's basically what I do in my coven. This is the training all of my trainees in our coven, all of our priestesses take. And it's for men and women, any gender. But in our particular coven, we only initiate women at the moment, or those who consider themselves women, which is why I said that. But so anybody can take this course, but I'm looking for at least 10 people to take it. And what we're going to do is I'm going to teach it over the summer. Once a week, people are invited to come to the Zooms as I teach a module of it each week. And then at the end of it, you have the whole thing, and it's yours forever to watch. And then we're going to repackage it and then sell it to people afterwards. But I will be looking for at least 10 people who just want to come on and take it with me right now as I teach it live. Okay, so that's something to think about. That's not going to happen until June, but I'm just putting it out there, and just know that that is going to be available eventually. All right, until next time, Blessed be. Okay, and I'll see you next week.